Well, hello there. As you can probably read from the title of the video, it is about the Wayward Realms, a video game, which is essentially a spiritual successor to Daggerfall. And since it is a spiritual successor to Daggerfall, it also contains a lot of things that were in Daggerfall, such as a lot of books and lore tomes. And that's what I want to go through today with some of the released content of the books that are going to be in the game. And I want to go through them and just talk about if they're good, if they're bad, and if they tell us something about the world. So my criteria for normally like video game books or codexes is normally like three things. Those three things being, one, they are telling us something about the world, meaning that we get some information from them, like a city, a race, a faction, or characters. This could also be the skill books it could be a relevant story that tells us how to improve on this as well. And then the second one is that it has to relate somehow to the plot. So now you can have a lot of lore books and tomes that can tell us about, say for example, some far-off country that we never get to interact with, and that's good on old Andy. But the issue with that is that we don't get to visit there, so it's not really relevant information. And then the third one is a bit more of a subjective claim, which is it just a good story? That's a lot more wibbly wobbly, and your opinion may differ from mine from this one. So yeah, that's all the establishment I'm going to do. I'm going to read through the entire thing, and if you just want to go to the analysis part at the end, then just simply skip to what the timestamp is in the description and the video below, and the description below, comments below. And yeah, so let's begin. Thief's Fall. I can still vividly recall the sound of Impse. Also, I'm not going to really be great at pronouncing this, so spine snapping in half as we hit the bottom of the rocky chasm, and it sends a shiver down my aching back. I would be dead if not for him. The fall was from a great height. I have more than a few cuts, scrapes, and bruises to show for it. I thought my ankle had broken, but after a few days, I am finally able to walk around on it. Nikiti must be shown some mercy. Our water skins are running low, and there are no more stale biscuits to eat. I wish I had rationed them better. It seems a long track through the gorge will be the only way out. I have thought about it over the last few days. There might perhaps be enough food to eat after all. I will do all that I can to reserve my strength. Unfortunately, I have hardly slept since the fall, as Impy's cries of pain keep me awake into the morning. He must have cracked his head upon impact, for he drifts in and out of consciousness. When he stirs, he does a little but moan in agony. Come night, when the fog descends down into the ravine and chills seeps into his bones, he begins to scream as if on fire. I contemplate putting him out of his misery by dropping a large stone on his head, but I cannot, so instead I have gone sleepless. This might be for the better, though. I can hear the wolves scratching upon the rocky crags above, searching for a safe way down, no doubt drawn to us by the cries. I would hate for them to catch me by surprise as I sleep, and I will not give them the chance to carry off Impy into the night like a fox with a cockerel. If they come, I will fight them off. At least their presence lets me know that there is nowhere to climb up. The best chance for escape is to follow the gorge until it ends, or the slope becomes shallow enough to ascend. I have decided to swaddle Impy in my cloak and carry him with me. However, hopefully we have enough water to keep us alive until I reach the way out. The thought of an orc carrying a goblin around like a child is almost humorous enough to bring a smile to my face in this dismal time. The wolves are growing hungrier. Last night they almost caused a rock slide in their search for a path down to us. I got scared and immediately set to work whittling down a shaft from one of the old dried up tree limbs scattered about the ravine. To it I fastened the spearhead Impy and I had been commissioned to seal. It is a lovely piece, and no doubt worth much more than they were paying us to retrieve it. It has elaborate etchings all along its surface, with engravings of old ruins that I am sure mark some kind of enchantment. If the wolves find a way down, I will be ready. I contemplate building a fire with some more of the branches, but I fear the smoke might alert us to our location. We were nearly caught by the Baron's mercenaries as we trekked across the high mountains. If we had not fallen into the cesspit, I'm sure they would have caught up to us on the trail. They should have long passed by now, but I don't know if they will double back. For now, I will avoid any fires even if Impy's continues to scream all night in the cold. I would rather face the wolves' teeth than the hangman's noose. I'm worried Impy seems to be getting ill. He has grown as pale as a goblin can get, and it seems a little feverish. I think he might have an infection. I may risk building a fire to cook his meat properly, and to avoid any possible diseases. I might try cauterizing his cuts while I'm at it too. The bandages I have applied keep soaking through, and I am running out of cloth to keep changing them. I may also have to get Impy a larger water ration to keep him from succumbing to a fever. I am scared that in the end neither of us will make it out of the gorge alive. I never should have taken this stupid contract. It was Impy who had insisted on it, saying we would make enough coin to book passages to Confintry. He said he has close friends that live on the flotillas and barge towns that surround the capital, and that he could get us into the Order of Saint Latra. Apparently, they have a good deal going on down there, running protection rackets on the locals. He said I would be a perfect fit with my size and intimidating appearance. It all sounded too good to be true. Now he is dying, and I'm stuck 2 or 3 poles into the ground. I found a dead wolf in the morning. It seemed like it had fallen through the crags and was crushed by the falling rocks and debris. The carrion birds have been hard at work on his carcass. I decided not to harvest any of the flesh, not knowing what kind of diseases it may harbor. I left it be and continued my march. Much more alert than before, I figured it would not be much longer before the wolves found their way down into the chasm. I was right. They came after us at nightfall. I just laid Impy down by the fire, and he began to cut up my evening meal when I heard them scurrying around in the dark. They came fast. I was barely able to grab the spear in time. The first one would have had my throat had I not managed to grab a hold of its lunged. As it lunged, using the beast's momentum, I flung it around out of the way. The next one sprang at me from a far enough distance that I was able to catch it on the end of the spear. It cried out, shaking violently like nothing I've ever seen before, until its body finally went limp. I peered the weapon loose with ample time to defend myself against the next. I pierced it in the ribs, and it immediately fell, convulsing and tossing around as its body were aflame. The unholy noises it made pierced my ears. After a few terrible moments, it finally died. More kept coming, each one fell before the spear. Their death throes displaying an agony no mortal being should have to endure. I can only assume that whatever strange enchantment is engraved upon its surface makes it deadly to the scratch. It is a tremendous death unlike any other. I was extremely cautious as I cleaned off the wolf's blood. In total, I took 6 of the little shards down, and another 3 ran away into the darkness. I doubt they will bother me again, but if they do, I am more than confident with this weapon at my side. As far as Impy is concerned, however, I am not sure he will last much longer. I will double my speed coming the morning. I am exhausted and dehydrated, but I cannot afford to waste more time. The wolves' attack indicates that an exit is near, and I intend to find out before Impy leaves this world. It has been a week since I made it out, and all has gone in my favor. I am pleased, Nikiti. It would seem I was quite angry at the thought of dying in such a rocky, desolate place, but through sheer determination I made it out of the ravine. Well, sheer determination and impism. It was his fault we wound up in there. He attacked me, angry at our argument over his poor choice of contracts, and sent us tumbling down into the chasm. Yet if his little body had not cushioned my fall, it would have been my head cracked open instead of his spine snapped in two. He proved further use when I realized I could harvest meat from his body to sustain myself. We were out of our biscuit rations, so of course, the course of my trip through the gorge, I slowly ate away at his legs. It was stringy and tasteless at first, but after cooking the meat over the fire, I almost came to enjoy the flavor. I just had to keep him from dying before I made it out in order to avoid his flesh going rotten. I did get scared when he took ill, but it all worked out in the end. In fact, he even served to distract the remaining wolves that were hunting us, as I left him at the ravine's entrance, a parting gift for them to feast on. The funny thing is, I would not have felt sorry about leaving him in such a state, had he not regained consciousness. He awoke just as we were clearing the rock crags and began screaming when he saw he no longer had legs below his knees. He started cursing up a storm and alerted the wolves that we were waiting in the nearby bush. I socked him and on the side of the head a few times and threw his mangled body at the beasts, walking away with a smile. Still, I cannot pretend that I would not have survived without him, nor would I have lost the trail of the headhunters had we not fallen into the gorge, and I certainly would not have this enchanted spear in my possession. I have decided to keep it for myself, contract be damned. It will come in handy, for I have resolved to take up mercenary work, and this spear is ever so deadly. The sad truth is, none of this would have happened without Impy. Perhaps I shall name the spear after him. Nah, that would be a stupid name. So, this story. Since it's the first one that came out, it was the first one that had to sort of establish what the world was, and that's not necessarily an unfair thing to say to it, because when you release one of these stories, it kind of gives you insight into the world, beyond the fact that they teased like art and whatnot on their Twitter. This is now a full book that's going to be in the game, and you can read it. And the only issue that I have with it is that it lacks context. Like, in what way are we going to consume this book? Are we going to consume this book in a we found it on like a dead body from an orc? Is this just a fairy tale? Not in the fact that it's fantastical, but that it's untrue. Or are we going to get a skill from this, like level up sneaking, or level up pickpocketing, or level up some sort of rogue skill? So that's why the first one, which I can say, which is it adds something to the world, is a bit harder for me to see if it does. But what it does add is it adds a few things, such as, if we go here, it adds a location, it adds a faction, and it adds, obviously, orcs and goblins. Now, as a orc and goblin book, it's not really that good, because it doesn't really describe their traits, it normally just describes them as people, so we don't really get an overview on who they are and what their culture is. We can get a general vibe that maybe orcs and goblins get along well, somewhat, but we don't really get anything more than that. So, because if you read on the Twitter, you can see that they want orcs to be more than just the stereotypical or the previous stereotype of orcs, such as savages, inherently evil and stuff like that. They want them to be shown as a different kind, not just humans, but that they're human-like in that sense. And this one doesn't really do that. It does portray the orcs or the orc as a kind of a savage and kind of a unempathetic ass. It's like, okay, sure, dude. But obviously that's not the point of the story. It's about a different thing. So I can't really say if it did well in the first category that I at least think it should do well in. The second one is, how relevant is it to the story? One, I don't think this is going to be too relevant to the story. Because one, it doesn't really seem like it's describing any events. Maybe we are going to go to this place and meet these people, but that's such a small book that's just such a small entry that doesn't really give us anything other than just like, oh, they exist, they do exist, who are they, what do they do? We can get contextual evidence what they do, but nothing much else. So I don't really think it succeeds in those first two categories. As for the third one, which is it just a good story? Now, your mileage may vary. I think it's pretty good. I like, for me, the sort of hints that go around. There might perhaps be enough to eat after all, and all these little other hints throughout the story before at the end where it just says, yeah, I was eating him, you know, like, where was it? Yeah, I could harvest meat from his body to sustain myself. Like, that's pretty good. I gotta say, I like those kind of stories where it sort of leads you to a conclusion and that's not really expected at the start, and it's just like a guy where we normally expect, like, okay, so they're gonna be in a difficult situation, but the guy's gonna, you know, pull through, and they're both gonna like laugh about it later. But no, the orc is just a terrible person, and he's, you know, just ate him, and then just chucked him to the wolves so they could distract him, which, I gotta say, is not necessarily the greatest thing to do. You know, just a small thing to say. But yeah, I think overall this is a good story. I don't think it's good for the first two because it lacks context to what it's going to be. It could be just a story that is told throughout the world. It could be a skill book, or it could be something else entirely. I don't necessarily know. I don't even know if we're going to meet the orc guy as a character at all, because at the current moment it doesn't really seem like that. Because, you know, there was no real hints, because no name was given about him. The goblin's name was given, but his name is completely ambiguous, so I think this is more just a skill book or a story that is just told about. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some value in it. I will be trying to do more of these things because I do think it is fascinating to talk about the Wayward Realms. It is a game type that I've not really played, and I am looking forward to seeing how it goes out. All the stuff that they have shown so far looks really good, and the stories that I've read look also really nice, and I want to talk about it. I hope you have a nice day. Enjoy.